I read Shari Franke's memoir, and family vloggers have got to be stopped. This video is a little bit of not an emergency video, but I read this book in 3 hours and was like, I've got to make a video about it. And then I didn't have time to fully organize all of my thoughts. So buckle up, because I'm the 9th passenger. Actually, now I'm the only passenger because YouTube took their account down, and they should have years ago. If you don't know who Ruby Franke is, then you probably have not spent a ton of time on YouTube. Even I knew who Ruby Franke was before I even really loved YouTube, because she was kind of everywhere because people kind of hated her right away. She was a mommy vlogger, former mommy blogger who gained over 1 million followers. Her account was called 8 Passengers. The 8 passengers were her 6 children, her and her husband. So I guess God was driving. And yes, God factors into this because Ruby Franke and her family are LDS. They're Mormon. The Mormon rebrand is to call yourself LDS, Latter-day Saints. We're saying Mormon, guys. And I know people say don't talk about religion. It's very controversial. I was raised Catholic. You think that faith is perfect? None of them are. But reading this book, I drew very, very obvious parallels between being raised in a very strict religious household, falling into the fame trap, and ultimately ending up as part of an alleged cult and ending up in prison for abusing your children. It is not hard to see the connections there, and Shari Franke, Ruby's oldest daughter, lays them pretty bare. A few things. The book is called The House of My Mother: A Daughter's Quest for Freedom. It is a memoir. That's apparently a biblical reference. I wouldn't know. I was raised Catholic. I didn't read the Bible. A priest did that for me and kind of just told me the gist of what was in it. But in the book, Shari refers to Ruby and Kevin as Ruby and Kevin, not as mom and dad, because when they abdicated their parental responsibilities by abusing their children and allowing the abuse to happen, in Kevin's case, they stopped being mom and dad. She also does not use any of the names of her siblings aside from her name and her closest sibling in age to her, Chad. Otherwise, every other kid is nameless, because the point of this book is that Shari is giving you the final word on what these kids have been through. There will be no more unless they choose it. Shari is going to live a private life. Good for you, girl. You deserve it. I hope you don't see this video. I hope you see no videos. I hope you are free somewhere, that your phone is in a gutter smashed to bits, and that you are just living the rest of your life. You deserve it. There is no detail on the physical abuse that the younger children went through, and there shouldn't be. If you are that curious about it, go read the court documents. We know enough. We know enough. What the story is a daughter trying to figure out what made her mother into a monster. The portrait that Shari paints of Ruby is somebody who was incredibly driven, and also somebody who was driven by an immense amount of insecurity and fear. Ruby grew up LDS. She went to college expressly to find a husband. She dropped out once she got married. She was engaged to Kevin 2 weeks after they met. She was, as Shari put it, auditioning husbands in those first few months of college. I don't know actually how long she was enrolled. It doesn't really matter. She was engaged after 2 weeks. They were married 3 months later. And then they started having kids, and not just a few kids, a lot of kids. They had 6 kids. Again, I grew up Catholic. I have 50 first cousins because each of my parents was one of 10. That's a lot of people. Ruby saw having children and becoming a mother as her highest calling, the most important thing that she could possibly do. So she had a baby, she had another baby, she had another baby, she had another baby, she had a few miscarriages, and she was, and I think this even before the conviction, she was not supposed to be a mom. Not everybody is supposed to be a mom. And when you grow up in a culture that tells you that certain things are compulsory, you grow up, you meet a man, and it's got to be a man if you're a woman, and you get married as young as possible, and then you have kids, and that is the path to adulthood and to a respectable, meaningful life that is approved by God, then that is what you're going to do, whether or not you should. Even before the cameras were rolling, Shari says that Ruby was very short with them, that she was frightening, that she would yell at them, that she would flick her lips, pull her ears, hit at her, that she was mean to her. Some of her journal entries, Shari's journal entries when she was just a kid, are her saying that her mom doesn't like her. She's immediately in a fight, flight, or fawn response with her mom when she is as young as 5 or 6. There's a scene in this book that broke my heart where Shari is at the piano teacher's house taking a piano lesson, and her teacher says, no, you haven't graduated from this song yet. And Shari is so overcome with fear about her mother's response that the teacher intuits kind of, what's waiting for her at home and says, okay, you can have your gold star. And it's so heartbreaking because you can see that this little girl just wants to be loved and she does not know how to get her mother's love. And again, not everyone should be a mom. Not everyone should be a parent. This is a very serious thing. It is not something to just tick off a box. It is not something to put on your to-do list. You are calling a soul into this world. Children don't ask to be born. They just show up. And to treat them as though they are in obligation that you are meant to fulfill your destiny, when really you are here to serve your children. You are here to guide them, care for them, love them, show them tenderness. They are whole people. That is a person. And it is your job to provide an environment for them where they can discover who they are, blossom, bloom, develop, not just push them into compliance, which is really the kind of mothering that Ruby Franke did. Ruby Franke started vlogging in 2015, but before that, she was a mommy blogger. And there's a reason for that. That is actually a part of the LDS faith. They are meant to document their lives. That is why there's so many Mormon mommy bloggers, mommy vloggers, TikTokers. I don't know why so many of them are beautiful, but they really are. I mean, good God, they make that look good. In Shari's words, record keeping is deeply ingrained in the LDS faith. It's a sacred duty, a way of bearing witness to God's hand in our daily lives. We're taught that our personal histories will serve as testaments for future generations, spiritual roadmaps guiding our descendants through their own mortal journeys. Every night, without fail, Ruby would make her rounds with a reminder. Did you write about what we did today? Don't forget to mention that funny thing your brother said. In my church, we're encouraged to document our lives meticulously, creating a roadmap for future generations to understand their roots. And it seemed as though the internet was just an extension of that, another way in which to do the Lord's work. Now, if the Lord's work is making videos about your daughter's first period or shaving her legs or telling the world that your son does not have a bed and hasn't had a bed for many months, then sure, go ahead and do the Lord's work. Great. Shari Franke is an adult now. She has done advocacy work within Utah, calling for some regulations around family vlogging. Family vlogging is essentially unpaid child labor. And even if somebody tells you that, oh, they're putting away money for their children, what they're also doing is taking their kids' childhood, taking their privacy, turning their children into performers. There are parts of your life that are private, that are personal, that are sacred. And I think children are sacred. I think allowing them the space to grow and develop and become whoever they are without a camera in their face is something that should not be taken for granted. That is, or it should be taken for granted. Actually, it should be taken for granted. That is exactly how childhood should be. There are Coogan laws in California that protect child performers, child actors, where a certain percentage of their earnings has to be put away for them. And often that is not even enough. It's not enough to pay for the long-term damage that is done to their psyches and their lives. It is not enough for them to build a stable future on. If you've not watched Child Star, Demi Lovato's documentary on Hulu, I would suggest that you do that. I also made a podcast episode called Meet the Sharents, and I'll link to that in the description, but I interviewed a former family vlogger who was a TikToker who decided to take his kids off the internet, and the reasons were exactly what you think they were. He could see the way that it was affecting his kids, and for some reason, Ruby Franke couldn't, or she wouldn't. It sounds like in this book, and Shari is basically dancing around it, she talks a lot about narcissistic personality disorder. It seems like that may be something that Ruby struggled with her entire life. But truly, Ruby should have never been a mom. She should have never had children. And even though the internet rang the alarm bells several times asking for CPS to come and check on the kids. There was kind of nothing that could be done according to Utah law. Shari talks about that a little bit, just that, if there's no obvious signs of abuse, it's very hard to, prove psychological abuse, emotional abuse, that kind of stuff. There's kind of nothing they could do. But the real kicker in all of this, the real reason that Ruby ever went to prison is Jodi Hildebrandt. Jodi Hildebrandt was somehow a licensed therapist, even though at one point she had been in trouble because she gave patient information to the Church of Latter-day Saints. Connections with an X. Why with an X? Connections. When people put an X in a word where it doesn't belong, where a simple CT would do the point, why? Why? Don't put an X in a word where it doesn't belong, unless you're going to say thanks, THX, which I'm fine with. But connections with an X? Okay. Jodi Hildebrandt had a program called Connections, where, of course, she was training life coaches who could do her kind of life coaching. And of course, once you paid several thousands of dollars to go through her course, you could do the same thing she did. She got her hooks in Ruby Franke real quick and real deep. And pretty soon she was giving therapy to Ruby and to Ruby's husband and to all of the children. And this therapy sounds a lot like abuse. This therapy sounds nothing like therapy. This therapy sounds like a cult. And Ruby was kind of primed for that. She was kind of primed for an authoritative figure to tell her what's good, what's bad, to give her very strict, very finite rules that she can follow and that she can also use to judge others. And that's what happened. At one point, very kind of quickly, Jodi moved in with Ruby, moved in with her. As soon as Shari was going off to college, Jodi moved into Shari's room. Shari just stayed on the couch or something until she went to college. And Kevin stayed in their marital bedroom. Shari goes upstairs at one point. There's candles lit in her bedroom and massage oil out. What Shari's basically dancing around this whole book is that Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt were definitely maybe having a sexual relationship. They were spending a lot of time in that room together. Maybe they were giving each other massages. Kevin moves out at one point and she talks to several people who are oh yeah, Jodi Hildebrandt is deeply closeted. Her MO seemed to be with a lot of her other clients. There's other references to this throughout the book, meet a woman and get the husband out of her life. When you are raised in a high control religion or a sect of a religion or in a high control parish or whatever it is, it's very easy, I think, to slip into another version of that. And that's what happened with Ruby. I think Ruby was always a bad mom. Ruby was always an abusive mom, but I'm not saying any of this to excuse what Ruby did. There's no excuse. She abused her children, deeply abused them in ways that are horrifying, in ways that I don't even want to talk about. And I think that she could fall for any kind of cult leader, because she was primed for it. And the way that Ruby raised Shari, in fear, always ready to be not loved, in constant fight, flight, or fawn, made Shari very susceptible to being assaulted and abused by an older man, also within her faith. And I'm not making this a rant on faith or anything like that, but I do think there's a difference between faith and institutions. And faith is a beautiful thing if you have it. That's great for you, as long as it doesn't infringe on anybody else's rights. And institutions are so often extremely damaging. And when this deeply inappropriate at best, illegal at worst, just truly, she doesn't say it, but you know what she's saying. When this comes to light, Shari is the person who loses her temple recommend, which is a deeply important part of her faith. This man is not. This man is not. She is. So not only does Ruby have to deal with surviving this abusive household, then she falls into this abusive relationship, which is not a relationship, is not a consensual relationship. She's being stalked by this older man. And then she watches her entire family get pulled away from her by Jodi Hildebrandt, just systematically dismantling an entire family until all that is left is Shari on the outside. And that is how you become a black sheep. You are the person who says, this is not right. This is not okay. I think in a lot of ways that fame of any kind is brain poison. And that could be internet fame, however large or small. If you have too many people looking at you, observing you, watching you, and you do not fully touch grass every day, stay very grounded in reality, you can lose yourself. And I don't think that Ruby ever really had a strong, solid sense of self. In no way am I trying to excuse her, but I do think that even that can make you susceptible to cult thinking, to having somebody come in and tell you who you are and how you should be. I don't feel bad for Ruby Franke at all. I don't think she is sorry, and neither does her daughter Shari. The way that she spoke about her acts in court at her sentencing basically said like, oh, I just got swept away in this thing. And like, you did get swept away in this thing, but you were always doing this. Like, I don't know. Like, do I think that every family vlogger is going to lock their children away and physically abuse them? No. I think that Ruby Franke is an outlier in that respect. But I do think that every family vlogger is taking their children's childhood and commodifying it, is taking away from their children something that they can never, ever, ever get back, which is their privacy. Their privacy. And I do think that in the very near future, privacy being unknown online, being known only in real life, is going to be the next frontier. That is going to be the next status symbol. It is going to be deeply cringe to be online, if it isn't already. I think I am, but I think I was born to be cringe. I really do. We can make those choices for ourselves. I'm an adult woman. We can't make those choices for our children. Our children do not know enough about the world, about technology, about themselves to consent to being actors in a reality show that we are producing and directing and profiting from. There's no amount of money that is worth your child's privacy. Shari Franke makes that abundantly clear. I hope that everybody who puts their children on the internet to monetize them reads this book and takes the warning. I'm going to leave you with this, which is Shari talking about their appearance on 2020, a respectable TV show. I hated 2020's approach. It didn't feel emotionally sensitive or appropriate in tone. I didn't think they had any motive rather than to make a popular documentary and capitalize on a shocking news story. I wondered how the public's consumption of others' pain and suffering crossed the line from empathy to voyeurism. How quickly have we, as a society, become numb to the struggles of others, our capacity for compassion eroded by the sheer volume of human drama we're exposed to daily. We were just characters in a soap opera now, except the drama was real and the consequences permanent. Our grief had been reduced to a mere commodity, packaged and sold, consumed and discarded. For content creators, news outlets, and true crime documentarians alike, the rewards of this emotional economy can be seductive. And the digital and media landscape remains vast and full of promise, but it is also a wilderness, and I fear we have lost our way. I knew I had to make a stand somehow. Part of that would be saying no to the world's desire for me to talk about my siblings anywhere, even in the pages of my own book. It is up to my brothers and sisters if they wish to share their story one day. But I'd be no better than Ruby if I detailed their experiences without their consent. They deserve to be given back the choice that had been stolen from them for so long. Absolutely. Amen. These kids should not have to live with the public burden of what their mother did to them. Go read Shari Franke's book. I read it. It was an ebook. I read it on my iPad. I read it in 3 hours. It was chilling. It was beautiful. Think about the content you consume. Stop paying attention to family vloggers. Stop watching family TikTokers. All of them. Stop. If you are interested in advocacy, there are several states that have legislation about family vlogs, about protecting kids from their parents online. I would recommend going to quitclickingkids.com. You can actually look and see what is going on in your state. The state of Arizona has a bill that has been introduced. So HB 2565 here in Arizona is going on. Go to quitclickingkids.com. You can see what is going on in your state and how you can join this movement. Kids do not need to be content. Get a life, get a grip. If you cannot hold the internet's attention by yourself as an adult online, you're not interesting. I'm Nora McInerny. I'm an author. I'm a podcaster. I'm a vlogger. You're never going to see my kids on here, so don't even ask.